Welcome to another episode of Healing Through Love. Each week, we share ideas, experiences, and resources to increase the awareness of domestic and family violence and to empower survivors to grow and thrive. We talk with experts who share their advice, or with people who have experienced abuse, no matter where they are on their journey. This is all about healing through love. And now, here are your hosts, Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson.
Vickie Lynn is a freedom fighter and overcomer, rising out of the ashes from 25 years of narcissistic abuse. She tells all in episode 36.
So I typically work with women who have already left their abuser, and they're in a stage or a place where they feel like there's no end in sight. You know, they're going to have to just grin and bear this hell on earth situation, sharing custody with the abuser. And a lot of it is we're always trying to help our kids, which makes sense. We're trying to protect them. We're trying to buffer them. We're trying to give them a better life, right? This side of abuse. But we also don't recognize, after we beat our head against the wall so many times, that we really can't control what happens at the other house. What happened?
The Healing Through Love podcast with Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson. The Healing Through Love podcast with host Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson would love to acknowledge Global Glamping Charities Incorporated for generously supporting this podcast. Global Glamping Charities, solving homelessness in all of its forms. Reach out to them at globalglamping.org. Hello and welcome to the Healing Through Love podcast. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Healing Through Love is here to help victims, survivors of domestic and family violence find their way back into living a more fulfilling and meaningful life. We interview experts and survivors who share their personal stories and they offer advice to those who have experienced abuse, no matter where they are on their journey. As well as the Healing Through Love podcast, we hold annual Pamper Days in Adelaide, South Australia for survivors of domestic and family violence. Local businesses come together and pay it forward by providing their services and resources for the day to give our survivors a much deserved day of indulgence. We are always looking for organisation or businesses with similar values. Please, if you would like to be a part of our Pamper Days, please get in touch with us at hello@htlaustralia.org. My guest today is Vickie Lynn, and Vickie, bless her soul, is a freedom fighter and overcomer, rising out of the ashes from 25 years of narcissistic abuse. Through her company, the Survivor Centre, she's a faith-based, high-conflict co-parenting and divorce coach, reaching back into the fire to help other single mums share custody with an abuser. Vickie empowers women to find their voice, create strong boundaries, and empower their children to do the same despite ongoing post-separation abuse. Her clients gain confidence, clarity, and tap into their own power to end abuse in their lineage and change the course of their legacy forever. Welcome, Vickie, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm glad that you could join us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Vickie, tell me if you would like to, share a bit of your story with us so that we can get some sense of, how you became a coach and freedom fighter.
Sure. Well, I was with my ex-husband, who is a undiagnosed narcissist, sociopath, specifically a covert narcissist, which is probably why I was with him for so long, because I didn't realize and recognize what was going on. We were together for 25 years. I was also raised by a narcissistic father, just a different, I like to say, flavor than my ex-husband. I thought I was getting the opposite when I married my ex. And together we have a child. And then I left him two different times, with my daughter. I really like to say I escaped two times. And she was the catalyst for me leaving both times. And after sharing custody with him for 4 years, which was another version of hell on earth, I was finally awarded sole custody and a protective order. And sometimes I hesitate to share that last part because people might think, oh, I wish I could have that. And I was in those shoes as well. But I share that because that's what I feel allows me to now speak up and out and be the coach to other women, because I have the space and the no contact and the clarity that is hard to have when you're day to day sharing custody with someone who's abusive.
Yeah, I get that. I was the same with my first husband, and I had to force him to have visits, and then when he had visits, he wouldn't bring the children back on time, and I'd get into a panic, even though I had a federal police order to say that he had to be on time, and I later found out that he'd been abusing my daughter. So and found out later that he was actually when he remarried, he abused his stepdaughters, and one of them actually committed suicide. So yeah, it was I'm glad I got out when I did. I thought he was a bit strange after a while because I used to work a very demanding job, and when I got home, there was no dinner cooked. The child hadn't been changed. The house was filthy, and he just did nothing. So yeah, it was. So you could call that, it was mental abuse more than anything else. And so I found my mother came to clean when I was pregnant with our second child, and she found some strange underwear in the lounge room chair underneath the cushion. So he didn't stay in the house for more than 5 minutes after that. He was out gone. So yes, I can fully understand that, and ongoing trying to get him to see the children afterwards, was just like trying to pull hen's teeth. It was, and then when he did have time with him, as I said, he was abusive. So yeah, it's things you find out, and it's not a pleasant thing to find out when your children are being abused by the other parent. So
Right. I'm glad that you got out as well.
yeah, well, and courts don't understand that. They think that that the child deserves to be co-parented, and even though you bring up the abuse with because we had to have forced counselling, and the things that are going on is still, it doesn't change anything. Why do courts insist on co-parenting when there's abuse happening? And I mean, I know some parents, or usually mothers, I must say, that bring up things about abuse to because they've got a vendetta against the other partner. But when you tell the truth, it seems to fall on deaf ears, and that's quite a sad state.
Right. I do. I feel like there was such a pendulum that swung the opposite direction from like the 70s and 80s, when moms would always get full custody kind of a thing and dads just get visitation. It just swung the complete opposite way to try to maybe, I don't know, fix that situation. But I think education of the courts and the judges needs to occur, and then more accountability in that court system too, because we're in two different countries and we have the same stories and can share the same lamentations about family courts not understanding and not believing mothers who claim abuse of the father. So it's a universal thing.
And some fathers have been accused of this abuse and it hasn't happened. And so I understand, the court's reticence to believe the story or, the facts. But that after some investigation, I mean, they must be people psychologists. I mean, that can weed out the wheat from the chaff, basically.
Right. Right. My daughter's therapist came to court and was able to attest to what I had been claiming. My daughter was also claiming from her perspective. Um, and that was a game changer. I mean, a total game changer, because without that, it still would have been my word against his.
Yeah, unfortunately, my children were quite small. I think they were 4 and not very, and just under a year old, so
Mhm.
they couldn't really say anything. But um, yeah, but when children are older, I think children's viewpoint should be brought into play, because they're the ones that are experiencing the abuse, and children aren't really programmed to lie.
Right. Right. I totally agree. I
Mm.
totally agree. And it's funny, even here in the States, it's not across all the states. Some states have no statute of when like a judge would want to hear from a child. 14 is other states. And then like some states just there's no precedent. So you never know if you recommend that, that you want your child to speak to the judge if they're 14, 15, if that's going to upset a judge and they're going to take away more custody from you, or if they'll, entertain it and hear from them. It's just really hard to know and navigate. And so much of what I found, you might feel the same, is that you have to go with your gut. Sometimes you have to, like as a mother, you have to go with your gut, or just take a risk and just say, I have to take a risk because, you know, the outcome could work in my favor. It's like a Wild West situation is what it
Yeah, well,
feels like.
conversely, it must be difficult for dads as well if they've got sole custody and the mother's abusive.
Right.
Who's to be believed? The mother who is
Mhm.
supposed to be nurturing and kind, and or the father who is most often painted the villain in everything. So it that this transpires in both sides of the story. I mean,
Yes.
if the mother's abusive, and well, most often people don't believe that the mother could possibly do anything like that, and then the next thing you know, all hell breaks loose. So
It's true. It's
yeah.
true. And on when I do like reels on Instagram, I always say him because it's my experience when I'm
Mm.
speaking, right? And the women I coach. But a lot of men will come on and say, "What about her? There's also women." And I say, "Yes, yes, yes, of course.
Yeah, I
It
think
it
we have
does
to
happen for
change.
sure."
Yeah, we have to change our language to, I think, get rid of those pronouns in situations where we're trying to coach, and recognize that men suffer through this as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that probably would be easier, then people wouldn't be so um, quick to jump on the bandwagon.
right.
Mm. Anyway, Vickie, sorry, we just got a little bit off track. What you have a coaching obviously program or strategies that you use. What are some of the strategies that you use to break that cycle and um, make changes in the way families move forward?
So I typically work with women who have already left their abuser, and they're in a stage or a place where they feel like there's no end in sight. They're going to have to just grin and bear this hell on earth situation, sharing custody with the abuser. Um, and a lot of it is we're always trying to help our kids, which makes sense. We're trying to protect them, we're trying to buffer them, we're trying to give them a better life, right? This side of abuse. But we also don't recognize, after we beat our head against the wall so many times, that we really can't control what happens at the other house. What happened, we can't control the other person. Okay. So the ex. And so I deal a lot with what can we control? And that is what we think, what we say, and our, building up our boundary setting, which a lot of us are recovering people pleasers, quite honestly. Maybe we never learned how to set healthy boundaries. And the first thing I get from a lot of people that I coach is, thinking that a boundary is going to help the other person stop doing something. And that's not what it's for. It's for, it's for them. It's to build confidence. It's to hear their voice and to then stick with that, which builds confidence over time, which then opens up a whole floodgate of, well, what else can I control? What else can I do? How else can I flex my freedom and my voice for myself and my kids?
Yeah, and some of those strategies, like setting boundaries is very important, but you need to teach your children how to set those boundaries as well. So when they're with the abuser,
Yes.
that they can learn to say no, or they don't like a particular behavior that's happening, and then that child is trusting enough to go and tell a third party, perhaps, if they don't feel comfortable telling the other partner. So, like, what's going on. So, a policeman, a teacher, a family friend, whatever, that they need to have that confidence to be able to go and tell the story, even if they've been told not to.
Right. And so much I feel when I use women again, just because this is my experience, but when women are afraid to say no and set a boundary with their co-parents, they're teaching their kids to do the same. So to your point, a lot of it is you start to stand up to the other person, right? To the abuser. And your kids may or may not see it, but they might feel it, they might hear about it, or they see it like in person. For me, the ex was notorious for, at every custody exchange, he would embrace me. And I didn't want to be embraced in any way at all. And so sometimes I would avoid, sometimes I'd pretend to be getting something out of the car. Avoidance, right, is a big tactic. But I also then sometimes would just forget that he was going to do it. He would hug me and I would just have my arms by my side. And he doesn't care. He just wants to intimidate, at least the ex did, wants to intimidate, control the situation and just see what they can get away with and see, like, okay, well, you got away from me, but I still have control over you. I can still do this. You'll still allow me. And I recognized, after getting so frustrated, mostly at myself, that I couldn't or had not said no, that I was showing my child that it was okay. And she knew I hated it. She could just see it in my face. They're just so intuitive. So that is when I sort of decided I have to stand up and stop this and show her how to do the same.
And as parents, I mean, if you as a child have come from an abusive background, it's up to us to break the cycle and not repeat behaviours. And unfortunately, there are some behaviours that we do bring with us, and we don't realise that we're doing some of those same things to our children. And it's recognising that we are bringing those things forward, because we really do need to break that cycle of abuse and stop. Like, if we are used to being in abusive relationships and we keep doing that, and our child or children will see that as normal. And so we need to learn and be trustful with ourselves to recognise that we are perpetrating the same behaviours that we are trying to not allow our children to go through.
Right, exactly. And I found that, and myself included, I wanted to shield my child from like everything possible. No more conflict, no more heartache, no more pain, right? And in doing that, I was shielding her from the truth of who her dad is, of the situation. And there was I had to mourn for my own loss, but I really had to mourn her loss of having this magical childhood. I mean, I could give her all the awesome experiences and be a great, safe, emotional place for her. But the reality remained, her other parent was an abusive, pathological liar. And, there was only so much I could shield her from. And so that is something I help the women I coach as well to come to terms with, because shielding them from the truth will only perpetuate the cycle to continue, to your point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I get that. I did the same with mine. Even though they were little, I shielded them from all sorts of things. But as they got older, I told them And yeah, so I mean, they've not had any contact with him since they were, quite small. So, and they don't want anything to do with him. One, because he's not made any effort to be in their life, and two, from what I've said to them, and they have no reason to doubt that my word is true. So, I mean, I haven't told any lies about him, that's for sure. But
right.
and we need
Well,
to,
and a
and
lot of
we need to be careful that we don't tell lies about the other partner. We don't embellish the truth. We tell it like it is, because if we embellish the truth or tell lies, and then the child finds out later on in life, you could be setting yourself up for heartache.
course, of course. And I'm glad in your case that I know this is sort of like a double-edged sword, but that he didn't pursue a relationship with them. That's another heartbreak and a loss for them, right? But there's also a lot of women who they are afraid to speak the truth to their kids because it's going to get back to dad. And then dad's going to claim parental alienation, that lovely term that's right. And so there's a fear. Well, I can't, tell them anything. So my approach is, well, let's help them come to the knowledge of the truth. Like, let's help them. You don't have to ever say anything necessarily. And for me, it started where I felt my child was lost. She was like 7, 8 years old. And she would come to me and say, Mom, I don't know who to believe. Dad says one thing, you say another. I don't know who to believe. And in my head, I was like, are you serious? Of course it's me, but, she didn't know that yet. And so I started to just ask questions. And this is something I would encourage anyone to do with their kids if this is happening, is just ask a lot of questions to help them realize, oh, maybe mom always, or if it's dad, insert whoever, one parent always comes through and pretty much seems to be telling the truth, and the other parent is unreliable, or they're a mess in some way, unstable, or they lie, and the kid catches them in lies, and that will just help them to see the reality without us ever saying the actual truth per se, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And kids are very intuitive anyway, and they usually work out things pretty quick.
Yes. And young too, like young, where you wouldn't realize, but like a 7-year-old might be like on it to just understand, not fully because their brain's not developed, but enough to know like this parent is unsafe and I really can't tell them everything, but I can tell the other parent because they are safe.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And kids will work this out pretty quickly for themselves. Then they're much more clever than we give them credit for.
They are. But I don't know if you feel this way. I don't know if you've ever been told that your kids are resilient after you shared how they may have been abused, but that's a hot topic for a lot of us because we don't want to hear that from people because it sort of minimizes what they have gone through, what they're going through.
I mean, even though kids are resilient, they still suffer the damage and the harm and the mental anguish after abuse, and it should never ever be minimized, ever.
Exactly.
Vickie, how can we, I guess, bring children, to be more aware of their surroundings? I mean, I know children are as a rule, but to see that one is abusive and one is not abusive, how can we get them to, and you did sort of say about, they work out who's lying and who's not lying, but how can we help them foster the truth lie bit? How can they work it out for themselves if they haven't already?
Well, there's a variety of things that I did for my daughter and then I help other women do, and a couple of them really have to do with because think about when a child is being abused, they typically will shut down a lot of their own feelings, right? And they will shut down that ability to feel. And we don't want that to happen. So I recognized that my daughter was shutting down. I also recognized she lacked empathy. especially for me. And it just was this light bulb moment. And so I think helping them as best you can to stay in touch with their feelings. So to express what they're feeling, even if they don't know, or they just say mad, sad, it can be just basic. It's fine. And then helping them get in touch with where they're feeling it. So I started talking to my daughter about, does she feel it in her chest? Does she feel it in her belly? And sort of going there so that they just stay in touch, because it's physical, it's visceral, it's not all up in your head, like we do talk therapy as adults. So that's not a kid thing, it's an adult thing. So keeping them in touch with their feelings and then being able to express them in a way that it is safe.
And
So
healthy.
yes. And I was healing my own self from my own childhood wounds I don't know, you probably relate to this too, like as you're raising your kids, because I started to be upset with her when she would get upset sometimes. And then I started recognizing, oh, that's exactly what my parents did. And you know what I mean? And like the cycle.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that's a cycle breaker right there.
Yeah, yeah, and breaking, as we discussed previously, breaking that cycle is so important. But we need to recognize that, and it's not always easy, because we've lived with that part of our life for such a long time that we don't realize that we're passing on those very same things to our children.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Vickie, if you could, give some words of advice to parents that are, having forced co-parenting because they have no other choice, and one's abusive, one's not. What advice would you give to them?
That's a huge question. So for me, and you mentioned me, and when you introduced me, that faith is a huge part of me and my coaching. And so I really feel like between the courts, like the long arm of the law, and perhaps the pressure and whatever manipulation or brainwashing that the other parent may be doing, the safe parent, the healthy parent might feel like they have no authority. Like they can't even be, a mother or a father, whatever it is, because they're worried that, someone's going to be upset with them or they're going to lose custody. And I would just encourage them that God has given them authority to be that safe parent in their children's life. And that so often the fears that we have don't come to fruition around this issue, because it is a lot of he said, she said, whoever's the right or the wrong. It's a lot of that in court. And I just found that once we're able to say, you know what, I'm going to take back my God-given authority over my life, and then being the parent to this child or children, that tends to make things a little easier, because you start to come out of being in like analysis paralysis or afraid to just say and do what you need to do.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And yeah, just take back your power. You've earned the right to be the parent that you want to be, and that your kids deserve. I think that's a great way of putting it. Vickie, where can people find you if they'd like to learn more about your services, or perhaps just even reach out to you?
Sure. So the easiest place is to find me on the web, thesurvivorcenter.com.
Oh, and uh, have you got anything that you'd like to share with the audience? Some promotion that you're currently got underway, or?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So next week on the 28th, February 28th, I'll be holding a masterclass uh, around this very topic about taking back your voice, specifically as the safe parent. And so if you want to message me, I can give you that information and help you to attend the class.
Terrific. Sure. And will you be holding this anytime after in the future? This masterclass?
So my plan is to do monthly workshops with a different topic each month. Yes.
Perfect. All right, Vickie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and your insights into co-parenting and breaking the cycle.
Thank you so much for having me and for having this podcast. It's so important.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Healing Through Love. You can get further resources, see the show notes, or simply reach out to us via our website at htlaustralia.org. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to your company next time on the Healing Through Love podcast.